Good morning, brand DIYers. How are you? Happy Monday. I hope you had a great weekend and I hope your week is getting off to a solid start. I'm pretty stoked to be back. It looks like it's going to be a good week here. A whole bunch of things going on, including putting the finishing touches on the brand DIY power packs and brand starter kit and a whole website that's all about giving you the tools that you need to take control of your brand. So I'm very stoked about that. I'm working on that with a couple of brand DIYers, Chris Burge and Chris Whiteley, both of whom have been on the show. So before we get started, I want to put it out there. It is the new year. I am looking for brand DIYers who want to come on the show. Tuesdays, if you're an expert in your field and you want to share something about your expertise. Thursdays, if you are a brand DIYer, if you're a brand steward who is hoping to take control of their brand or trying to take control of their brand, and you have a specific challenge and you want to come on, we will try to solve that specific challenge in half an hour. So Tuesdays for experts, Thursdays for entrepreneurs who want to be in the hot seat and put their challenge out there for us to solve together. All right, so I hope I will repeat this again and again and again. I hope to fill up the ranks again and be booked out into the spring. It was great in the fall. We were booked out 2 months in advance and I've neglected it. And so now we've got a few more weeks of guests, but I'm looking to fill it up until Q2. So hop on and let's do it. Today, I want to talk to you about a subject that as a creative director is very near and dear to my heart. I want to start with a sort of a parable, a metaphor. There were two people and they were riding towards a village. And they passed one bricklayer who was making bricks in the field. And they said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm making bricks. They said, okay. Then they rode their horses a little bit further and they saw another bricklayer who was making bricks. And they said, what are you doing? And he said, I am making bricks to build that cathedral over there. That's going to be a new cathedral. And they said, oh, that's very interesting. The last guy didn't tell us anything about that. They keep riding. They come to a third bricklayer making bricks. And they said, what are you doing? And he says, I am building a monument to God. So those are three bricklayers who are doing exactly the same job, making bricks. One has no clue what he's doing it for. Two kind of has a clue, but isn't very inspired. And the third one is fully inspired to make bricks and do the best job that he can because he knows he's making a monument to God. So this brings us to, it takes a village to build a brand. A brand is a complicated thing, or not complicated, complex. It's like an onion. It has lots of layers, and that's what makes it rich and interesting. Building a brand is a bit like building a cathedral. You have to have a few elements like building a cathedral. One, you have to know that you're building a cathedral where people will go to the cathedral. Are you building something that has customers, or are you just building a flight of fancy? What do the customers want? If you live in a largely Jewish village in the Middle Ages and you're building a Christian cathedral, chances are you've read your audience wrong. That's not what they want. The second thing you need visionary people who are going to come up with a brief and envision what the finished product will look like. And that's you. Those are the people who say, this is what my brand should be. Three, you need craftspeople around you because you can't build that cathedral by yourself. You need bricklayers and people who make the pews and architects and people who make stained glass windows. You need hundreds of craftspeople to create a beautiful cathedral. And finally, probably most important, you need communication. If you don't communicate properly, you will be surrounded by people who think they're making bricks. If you do communicate properly, you will be surrounded by people who say, I'm building a cathedral. And if you communicate extremely well, not only will you be able to tell them what they're there to do, but inspire them to do the best job ever so that they believe they're building a monument to God. All right? That is how you want to create a brand, by taking a village and getting the absolute best out of them. So there are 3 models for getting this done. The one-stop shop, and that's where I came up in the world, the traditional ad agency model, the brand agency, and the integrated marketing team. And that last one is what I really want to touch on. But let's go through the first 2 first. So the one-stop shop, like I said, that is the model that I came up in the world in. And this was a model that was honed and perfected in the 1950s. Mad Men, Madison Avenue, massive ad agencies, hundreds of copywriters, hundreds of art directors. So in this model, a client hands off their brand completely to an ad agency. The ad agency then thinks of every single element that needs to go into building that brand, from PR to design to media booking to what have you. Not only that, but they have all of those people inside their 4 walls. That's why traditional ad agencies tend to be pretty big companies. Now, there are obvious advantages to this model. The advantage is that the agency has their finger on the pulse right from the start to the very end execution. So they can figure out what the vision of the brand is going to be, and they're good at this stuff. And they can oversee all the craftspeople as they execute every single step. At the end of the day, they can look at everything and they say, yeah, it all hangs together, it all belongs together, and it creates a cathedral. The downside is that agencies generally do not hire the best of breed craftspeople. How can they? An ad agency that hired only the best people, best of breed, would go bankrupt tomorrow. So what they tend to do is they hire super senior staff at the top and then hire junior people down below. In theory, the senior people oversee the junior people, elevating the juniors' work to a great level. I have seen it work, and more often than not, I have seen it not work. It's not the most inspiring avenue, especially if you're handing over your brand, hook, line, and sinker, and you don't have that much input into the brand. You're giving it over to people who, when they shut the door and you leave the building, they are handing over that work to a whole bunch of people with very little experience. So it's like getting bricklayers who are bringing in apprentices for all the work. Yeah, it might be cheaper, but when that roof is built 200 feet above your head, do you want to know that an apprentice built that roof or that a senior craftsperson built that roof? So that takes us to the second model, the brand agency. In this model, you have a core group at a brand agency, and these are usually people who are a strategic firm or a ad agency, smaller design shop, a PR firm, but they focus on one very specific craft, creating the ads, creating the design, creating the PR. So you have one very small core group that works directly with the client to come up with the vision, and then they work as general contractors, grabbing craftspeople as they need them for all the specific different tasks. Now, the advantage to this is obvious, especially when you hold it up against the traditional one-stop shop. You get best of breed all around because the brand agency can reach out to people they know are absolutely the best in their field, bring them in for a short gig. They don't have to pay benefits. They don't have to pay unemployment insurance. They just bring them in, pay them a contractor fee, boom, they're done after the project. So they also tend to bring in specialists who do things that a one-stop shop might not even think of doing. Another problem with a one-stop shop is that it's a bit like a hammer. When you're a hammer, every problem, excuse me, when you're a hammer, every problem tends to look like a nail. You only have very limited resources, so you only create very limited executions. When you're a brand agency, you go, I don't know how we're going to solve this brand problem. Let's try a whole bunch of stuff. So it opens you up to trying a whole bunch of new stuff and getting very, very senior people. So the disadvantage to a brand agency, it's the same as the one-stop shop, is that the brand still resides in the brains of the people working in the brand agency. So you have still, as a client, given over your work to do to them. So they still own it. Now that might be great for you if you've got way too much on your plate and you can't afford to handle all that stuff, but you are brand DIYers, you're entrepreneurial, and I'd be willing to bet that you would like to take more control of your brand because that's the way you're wired. Entrepreneurs like to have control. So that brings us to the third model, the integrated marketing team. This is the scenario that we are pushing at BrandDIY. In this scenario, the client owns and has control over their brand. That is, you know who your customers are. You get who they are. You understand what sort of ways your customers want to be communicated to. Is it through ads? Is it through PR? Is it through stunts? What have you? You act as the central hub, organizing all these activities, bringing in the craftspeople yourself, briefing with them, putting them on timelines, and ensuring that the output is not just harmonious so that everything makes its own gravy, but that it's on brief and everybody is creating work that pulls in the same direction. Now, the advantage to the integrated marketing group is that you own the brand. The brand resides in your head and your heart. You're not at the mercy of an outsourced big brain who knows what the brand needs better than you do. The problem, I think you see the problem. The problem here is that you need a very strong person inside the organization to shepherd the brand. So if you have got 20 other things on your plate right now and you need to build the brand, I can tell you that things are going to fall off the plate. Probably the brand will suffer. You will create work that is maybe off brief, or it's mundane, or you're using the wrong media based on what your customers want because you just don't have enough hours in the day. Now, there is a way to pull this off. There's always a way. And I want to go back to a great project that I worked on where we used the integrated model. And that was at Procter & Gamble. And we were trying to bring Mr. Clean back from the dead. Mr. Clean was on the verge of bankruptcy. And so Procter, in their wisdom, didn't hire an agency to do the job. Very, very out of character for Procter. They had agencies for everything. Instead, what they did, they hired a super senior creative director, very successful guy, one of my heroes. And he organized the entire project. Now, he was a contractor too, but he worked hand in glove with the client so that it was, in effect, it was the client. He was the client. He was on the client side. Nobody had any doubts about it. However, he reached out to us and he brought us in, even though we were with the agencies that worked on different accounts for Procter. But on this project, we were the craftspeople. Together with us, he sat down for 2 days and we mapped out a brief for the resuscitation of Mr. Clean. And it covered tons of big walls, lots of paper, lots of thinking. How could it play out? How could he get the best out of each of us individually to make the gravy so that every single part we added to it would add to the whole and make everything a lot tastier and more appealing? And at the end of the day, the project was a huge success. So that is one way to do it. You can bring in somebody super senior like me, and I have clients who do this all the time. They bring me in as their helper on a project, and what I do then is I bring in all the craftspeople and we do the project and then we all disband. Another way to do this is to say, hey, you know what? I'm a brand DIYer. I think I kind of know what I'm looking for in my brief. I'm not quite certain. I'm going to put it out there at Brand DIY, and you put it out to other entrepreneurs like yourself. And this is a fantastic way to do it. One, you don't pay. Two, people who don't know your brand will be looking at it and going, huh, as somebody who understands your product but doesn't know your brand, I see it from the cold eyes of an outsider, which your customers are. So if you bring in people for help who are like your customers, chances are you're going to get a very refreshing perspective on what your brief should be, what media you should communicate with, what constitutes good communication, what constitutes bad communication. And the beautiful part of this is that with everything you learn from reaching out at Brand DIY and asking people what their thoughts are, that goes into your brain, not into the brain of the creative director at the one-stop shop or at the brand agency. You own that brand equity, and you own the experiences and maybe the mistakes or side steps that you've made along the way. So you become an incredible resource for the brand. Very, very strong. And I think that's what all of us are looking for. So that is the route that I suggest to entrepreneurs. Figuring out how to become the best brand steward they can be, perhaps by reaching out to somebody like myself, or more often than not, reaching out to other entrepreneurs and customers to learn and put it out there and say, hey, should I do this? Should I do that? What do you think? What's your experience? You muddle through it at the beginning, but every time you muddle through it, you get a little bit better and a little bit stronger, and your brand starts to take shape. And like I said a few times already, you start to make gravy. All the things that you've learned, you add them in, and all the elements start to look really good and be super tasty. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. It takes a village to build a brand. You need the craftspeople, you need the visionaries, you need a plan, you need excellent communication. How can you create that village to build a brand? I believe that you, as an entrepreneur, can do it. You can pull it together, and you can be the hub with all the craftspeople as the spokes around you. So that's all we got today. Tomorrow, we have a brand expert coming in at 10 o'clock, so stay tuned. And if you have any questions or comments or anything at all, throw it out there on Brand DIY. Final thought, if you're an entrepreneur, you want to come on the show Thursdays, put your problem, your challenge out there, and we'll try to solve it for everybody's benefit. That's Thursday mornings. Tuesday, if you're a brand expert, you want to share your expertise, I am looking for both entrepreneurs and brand experts to come on the show. Talk to you soon.